their SDK, are basically just sort of monolithic applications that come from the vendor, and all of the functionality that you get is in that one application. With Good, you have a little bit of flexibility. They have a JavaScript API, and you can write some limited sort of little apps to run on it. But they're sort of a limited platform where you have to sort of develop a specific application for that environment. And we're trying on both the iOS and the Android to say, we don't want to be in the SDK business. That's not our play. We don't want to try and educate developers to say, must use these APIs or must call this. And we're really trying to be able to run, whether they're in-house or third-party apps, but they're just standard applications off the street. So on Good, if you wanted to go and write your sales support ticketing app or something like that, you'd have to go and write it explicitly to their API. Whereas with our Horizon Mobile for Android, we can just write it using the standard SDK, or whether it's Google SDK or whether it's some other third-party one, and that APK file runs just completely unmodified, with all of the policies and security and everything applied around the outside. And it's the same on iOS. The internal developers, the sales support people, or whoever it is that are developing the apps, they come along, they develop it using the standard APIs, standard development tools. They've got no idea of what the policies are going to be applied to the outside. They then just take their application and in order to deploy it out to the wider market, it gets wrapped in the policies applied. So our real distinguishing factor here is yes, if you just use the platform for just the built-in applications, then we're functioning good. But as time goes on, even within VmWorld, we have quite a large number of internal applications for all sorts of reasons, from the sales people, the support people, operations. All of these groups have developed their own little productivity app, and to be able to sort of take that app completely unmodified, wrap it, put the policies on, and be able to control and work out who's actually installing it and retrieve lost copies of it and so on is a really powerful piece. So I think the real value for the Horizon mode doesn't really come along until you start having this number of apps. In our sort of beta trials and things, it seems to be on average that most corporations seem to end up with somewhere around a dozen internally developed apps. Quite often they're very simple little things. They're just front ends to web services or front ends to databases. We have run across various companies that got as much as 50 or 60 internally developed apps. And you're actually almost getting to, you need an app store with searching functionality and all of the rest to just keep track of them all. Because you end up with so many of them coming from different pieces. But yeah, VMware internally, it's very hard for us to keep track of how many internally developed apps, because each of the different groups will go off and develop different business units. And they don't necessarily always talk back to central IT before trying to deploy them out. Although legal normally ends up catching that and forcing them back through central IT. I'm not sure that that's really the effective way, but we're trying to basically have that same approach where the individual business units can develop their apps or source their apps from third parties, and then just be able to give it off to central IT and say, this is the percentage of users that I want to deploy. Go pick them up and make it happen. Yes.
Other global solutions have had a feature this one in particular, the idea was you had reps that were needed for
So the question is around enterprise connectivity. So enterprise security models today are that you create this wall pen, if you wish, a firewall around your internal network, so all the viruses can be inside and not outside. And then you have a VPN connectivity to go into the inside so that you can get infected by the viruses running inside, not the viruses running outside. And on our Android products today, we support running a VPN. So we basically take the whole virtual machine and you can configure VPN, and that says that enterprise. And we're working with all of the VPN vendors to implement that. And we implement it just by literally taking the stock client that you take off the Android marketplace and working with that. Although we've discovered that the stock clients on Android tend to be a little bit flaky, and that we've had to have a continuous bug-fixing relationship with the VPN vendors to get something that we think is stable enough to use. But for your Cisco and Juniper and F5 and so on, on the Android product, that's what we do. And that's just using IPsec VPN, the standard piece. On the iOS side of the world, because we don't have kernel access to be able to do this VPN, and if we do VPN on iOS, it's very easy to have VPN for all of the applications on iOS. And what we're trying to do here is just have just the applications in the workspace do VPN. We'll probably end up doing much more like an SSL VPN style solution. So it's a sort of higher up the networking stack where we sort of intercept all of the TCP connections rather than network packets and redirect them off to a gateway, whether that be an open source gateway or whether we do that with the existing vendors from bits and pieces. But the interesting question that always comes up with this networking access is not so much the physical, how do I get the packets from A to B, that works quite nicely. It's really the authentication that the user has to go through. So if I pick on one particular company, not to be named, the user experience of their solution on the device is that once every 3 minutes they have to enter a PIN code in order to access the applications on the device. And then once every 4 hours they need to do an RSA token challenge in order to maintain their network connectivity. And then once every 7 days they have to re-enter their Active Directory account in each of the applications. So as you can see that, here we have the corporate enterprise obviously has 3 different groups, each of which have decided upon their particular authentication requirements, and the poor mobile user is left with typing their password many times at random intervals. And it really doesn't come out to a very usable scenario from bits and pieces. So I think we are definitely trying to push a model where you sort of end up trusting the device. So once you enroll a particular device, you set up a certificate-based or other sort of permanent tokens to authenticate the device to the edge of the network. And then from there you just have the workspace PIN code to unlock and get access to all of the applications, which of course are the only applications that can access that tunnel, to try and balance this usability versus security that people have. But yes, we see that offering internal connectivity is very important. I mean, it's just, you can take something as simple as, probably about 80% of the emails that I get from internal VMware systems will have some link back to some internal VMware website. And, without that sort of internal connectivity, it's not really as useful as it should be. So we are very definitely working hard to try and both solve the technical how do we transfer the packets, but the harder problem of how do we work with the enterprise IT security to agree on an authentication scheme. Yeah, so as part of the Horizon suite, there will be a built-in SSL gateway, probably just an open source component like Squid with a suitable configuration file, and then we'll have white papers that say, if you already have Microsoft TNG on that, then here's the configuration that you should go and enter in all those places to use that instead of the built-in one. We're not trying to force you to use anything. We prefer to use existing infrastructure rather than create our own. That discussion comes up all the time on the Android side of the world. It's nice to be able to work in with the Ciscos and the Junipers and the F5s of the world, but then once you actually start rolling this out on scale, the networking security people realize their user counts on their concentrators have gone through the roof, sort of all of these mobile devices, and the pricing for concentrators is not overly cheap. And therefore that's actually causing some people to rethink the model of using the existing network concentrators for that. If you're paying hundreds of dollars a year for ports on your network concentrator, it's not a very scalable system from that perspective. So I think we sort of got our first version